Well, here we are. This is, I suppose, the pilot episode of a podcast that Zach Fisk, my esteemed friend and colleague, and I will be doing. I'm Sam Askew, and
I'm Zach Fisk.
Yes, and our general theme for this, I think, is really just storytelling. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think especially as it pertains to writing. And I guess we can just quickly preface who we are and how we relate to fantasy and to writing. So,
So both of us, both Sam and I, we are producers. And so we're in the creative world. We produce, edit, write videos. But separately, we're also really into fantasy. And we both love epic fantasy, specifically Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
And science fiction of all kinds. And so Star Wars would fall under that. And so Star Wars is actually the topic for our podcast today.
That's right. Yeah. So I guess the topic that we're going to go off of here is having The Last Jedi already come out, right? Of course, it's a very polarizing movie.
Very.
I guess we can quickly preface this too. Zach and I are both huge Star Wars fans.
Absolute nerds.
I would say neither of us is like the kind of person that worships everything Star Wars.
I haven't read every single Star Wars book.
No, not
I've
even
read
close.
a couple, but
and I'm sure there are plenty that are amazing, and I'm sure
We're
there are
not
plenty
those
that are
nerds.
bad. But anyway, we're both big Star Wars fans, but we both thought The Last Jedi was hot trash, basically.
absolutely horrible.
For the most part, it had its moments, I think. But
It had its moments.
anyway, so our prompt for today is with The Last Jedi having already come out, it's already happened, it's already done. How would you write Episode 9? So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting prompt, and I think one of the things we want to explore, both as writers, as storytellers, is, exactly that prompt is, okay, let's say Disney approaches you and episode, what was that, episode 9? That was episode 9? Or is this episode 9?
This upcoming one is episode 9,
This is episode 9, sorry.
subtitled The Rise of Skywalker.
The Rise of Skywalker. Okay, so episode 8 is already out, and with all the reviews and everything, what would you do? Would you just ride that train off the cliff? Would you try and go back and retroactively fix things? So just as a writer's experimentation, this was a really interesting question that we wanted to explore. So Sam, why don't you go ahead?
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
So last night, really, I was just kind of refreshing myself on, I guess, the immediate Star Wars story leading up to Episode 9. And I've just written down a few notes here. Of course, there are a million things to talk about. So I guess we can just cut right to the chase of what we think is the most important, most interesting.
Right.
I think we're going to this is going to be a bit more of a zoomed out discussion because we can't really dig super deep. But that's okay. Cutting to the point, going back to Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. I thought it was interesting seeing Luke's arc in that. How something that you, Zach, have pointed out to me is that, for the original trilogy, Luke is this super golden retriever, like good guy, good person. And so, I think a lot of people, and like both of us included, sort of felt it was a bit off that Luke is suddenly this kind of hermit, super cynical, brooding person.
Yeah.
I don't innately disagree with that choice with Luke. I just think that's a total 180. It's one thing if you do that with like Leia, right? But to do it with Luke, who's this like golden, shining good guy, it warrants a huge justification, I think.
Absolutely.
One thing I noticed though, in just reviewing Episode 6, is that Luke is driven to pretty intense anger when he's on the new Death Star with Palpatine and Vader. So basically, Luke surrendered himself, long story short, trying to talk Vader out of the dark side. But Vader and Palpatine are essentially revealing that the attack on the shield generator in Endor, it's all a trap. We're going to destroy your friends. And also, we know that Leia is your sister. We're going to convert her to the dark side. So when Luke hears this, he freaks out. He's super pissed off. And he starts attacking Vader.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? And he cuts off Vader's artificial hand.
Right.
But then Palpatine's like, haha, you have defeated Vader. Now you can kill him and be his replacement. And then Luke's basically like, no, I'm a Jedi like my father.
Yes.
And so he kind of 180s again. But I
But
just
that
think
was his test. I mean, that was that was the ultimate moment where Luke showed who he truly was, and in writing, that's kind of the key things is like characters revealed through choices and choices made under stress and under duress. And in that moment,
right.
he made the ultimate choice, which revealed his true character.
Sure.
And so I think, hopping off what you said is like, that's what the new trilogy got absolutely wrong, we think, is just they totally misunderstood Luke's character. Is that deep down who he is he's a character of hope. Like he always, in the end, gives in to good and does the right thing.
Yeah.
And so for him to go off, and be this cranky old man and go into isolation onto this island and totally withdraw himself from society and just ignore the conflicts that are raging in the galaxy. It's just totally against, I think, the whole character arc of the original trilogy, of where Luke started off from and who he became. And so, yeah, it's just totally inconsistent, I think.
Yeah, and so, right. And so as you pointed out to me a little while ago, to put it very succinctly, Luke is the person who hopes against hope. He's the person who hopes no matter what.
I like that.
Like he saw the good in Darth Vader. He probably even saw the good in the Emperor or something,
Right.
So again, I'm the kind of person where I'm not a fan of cliches. I love Star Wars, but in my opinion, Star Wars has always had cliches, like throughout the whole series. I'm not saying
it's built on cliches.
Right. And I'm not saying the whole series sucks. I love Star Wars. It's just like, even Luke, I think, generally speaking, is a very standard archetypal character. So on the one hand, I appreciate that they introduced some darkness into the pot for Luke. I just think it was a bit abrupt. I think we would agree that it's just a bit out of left field. Anyway, so fast forward to episode 7. Here's one thing to talk about leading up to how we would write 9. There are two characters when I was reviewing 7 that really stood out to me. One to a lesser extent is Maz Kanata.
Oh.
Right? So what is your opinion of Maz Kanata?
Well, I'm just like, I think she's a plot crutch. I think she's just introduced as a character that could have huge potential. Okay, very interesting new character. Yes, I'd love to explore, some other angles of the galaxy and get into a little bit of Han's history as a smuggler and those connections. But overall, she's just kind of used as a plot crutch and doesn't really serve any other role. And then, in episode 8, she just, has just like,
She's like barely there.
a 10-second appearance. And it's
Right.
like, what happened to this character? And apparently she's, again, Sam here. So here's the thing about
This is
episode
some
9
context.
is that I have seen trailers for episode 9. So I have kind of an idea. And so I'm colored and biased as to how I would write episode 9. But Sam is a purist. And so he has absolutely not seen any trailer except for maybe one that he didn't want to see.
I normally intentionally don't watch trailers. I want to have
Absolute
as
purist.
few spoilers as possible. That's just me. I think trailers are awesome. They're an art form in themselves. The way you edit a trailer, it's an art form, right? The hype you build. But for me personally, I just prefer to have as unbiased or to have like no expectations when I go into a movie. The only thing I've seen is that little teaser where Rey's in the desert, probably on Jakku or Tatooine, same thing basically, and she jumps over the ship. That's all I've seen.
Tatooine 2.0.
Yeah, right.
Let's face it. Right. So he has no preconceived notions going into this episode, which I envy. I wish I could get some of these images out of my head, but unfortunately, I've seen too many trailers.
Yeah, so I guess during this podcast you can reveal some of that to me, but maybe that should be later after I've said what I would do.
So one thing that we have, an idea we have for this podcast is we'll have a follow-up after we've both seen episode 9.
Yeah, that is absolutely going to happen.
So stay tuned for that one.
Yes, for sure.
That will be very interesting, comparing our notes.
Yeah, so at this point, for those unaware, we'll probably have this in the info of this upload, but today is December 6th, 2019, so we're exactly 2 weeks away.
Happy Sinterklaas to any Dutch listeners out there.
Yes, absolutely. We're exactly 2 weeks away from episode 9 coming out, so that's where we are in space-time right now. Anyway, so for Maz Kanata, I like her as a character. She's not super developed, but of course, I think in storytelling, you can't have every character have like a Shakespearean arc, you know, like certain characters are going to serve plot devices and all that.
Sure.
And I would agree though that she is a bit of a crutch for the plot. It's interesting how, like, according to like some interview blurbs I've seen, Maz Kanata is like over 1,000 years old. And she's had this this kind of pirate smugglers hangout thing for over 100 years, right? And so that definitely covers more than all the Star Wars movies we've seen so far. And so, you know, she knew Han Solo, right? That's why they visit her.
Yeah.
Han knew her as like one of his smuggling contacts, buddies. The very interesting thing, though, is the fact that she had, I guess, what I would call the Skywalker lightsaber in her basement.
Yeah.
Right.
How did she get that?
And yeah, so a quick history of that. Basically, Anakin's lightsaber is destroyed at the beginning of episode 2, I think during that assassination attempt. And then he quickly gets a new one. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes down. So he has that lightsaber first in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, right? You know, in episode 3, Anakin and Obi-Wan have their epic duel. Anakin's burning. Obi-Wan picks up the lightsaber, right? He's got it for decades. He eventually gives it to Luke in episode 4, etc. And then, but
so this is the same. This is the lightsaber though that he loses in Cloud City, doesn't he?
Right, exactly. So in episode 5, when Luke's hand is cut off, that as far, if I'm not mistaken, is the last we see in the timeline of the Luke Skywalker
the original
lightsaber.
Anakin Skywalker lightsaber.
It's in Cloud City, and so now Maz Kanata has it. So that's just interesting, I think.
And one thing that I've always wondered with that is, if they were able to retrieve that lightsaber, were they able to retrieve Luke's hand?
And is it alive? And has it become self-aware?
Has it? And actually, so this is actually one of my predictions for episode 9, which I haven't seen this anywhere, but this is logically what I would follow from that, is that Rey is somehow some sort of clone built from the cells of Luke's hand that
that's
was cut
fascinating.
off. And that would explain her Force sensitivity. At least that's the route that I would go with. I think that is probably, for me, the most compelling. And
that's interesting. Yeah.
I think that would make a lot of sense as to why she doesn't seem to have a prehistory of any kind. And anyways, it will be interesting to see if that is actually the case.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's the thing. So we're definitely,
whether she was some sort of like lab hatched, created by, well, spoiler here, possibly Palpatine somehow. And I think that they've hinted at that in some of the additional books and source materials. In that, I read that Jakku, that Emperor Palpatine actually had a research center based on Jakku. And so that's actually canon. So that's canon in one of the books that detailed, I think it's Royal Bloodlines or something like that. I'm not sure, but it was a story about General Leia, and basically explaining what's happened to her since Return of the Jedi. So I find that a very, very interesting.
I think that would make a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think that leads me right into the next thing I was going to talk about was there are a number of very important and mysterious and prophetic visions that Rey has in episode 7 and 8. And who doesn't love that? I mean, in fantasy writing, prophetic, mysterious visions, they can be also a bit cliche, but they're also so much fun and they're so interesting. And especially as a writer, it must be a ton of fun to implement one. And anyway, so here's a quick recap of Rey's vision when she's downstairs in Maz Kanata's basement approaching the lightsaber, right? She really seems to be drawn to it. She hears like a child crying. Maybe that's her as a baby, right? And so basically she touches it, and it seems like she's witnessing kind of the slaughter, Kylo Ren slaughtering the Jedi Academy people, right? And she sees like Kylo Ren in the dark rain of lightning, their people sort of ominous dark bad guys sort of standing behind him, right? So there's that, and then and we hear like I'm pretty sure it's a sound sample from episode 5 or 6 of Luke screaming no, and I think that kind of evokes Luke's anguish over how things went down at the Academy, right? And then
if she is a clone of Luke's hand, it would make sense that she somehow would have access to his memories, because she wouldn't have been there for the slaughtering of the of the Academy, but
Yeah,
somehow maybe
I really don't think she was there.
she's connected to Luke somehow, and so somehow she shares these memories or something, because in a way she's
And you know what's interesting too?
biologically connected.
Because I just rewatched that flashback. There's this kind of close up, or it's like the camera's like dollying in on a hooded figure placing a robotic hand on R2D2.
Which we know
Right.
was Luke.
I mean, I feel like we're pretty sure it's Luke. Theoretically, it could be someone else because you don't see the person's face, but
True.
I feel like it's probably Luke, right? And
Yeah.
the camera, it seems like the center of the frame, if I'm remembering correctly, it's sort of just dollying right in on that robotic hand. So that could be a hint at, you're from Luke's hand. But anyway, after that,
that's awesome.
Isn't that
I
interesting?
didn't make that connection until now.
that could be it.
A visual connection. Interesting.
And so right after that, in Rey's Vision in episode 7, we see like Rey seemingly being abandoned on Jakku. And I think it's interesting to think about what if that's actually Tatooine, right? But she's being abandoned on a sandy planet, it looks like, and she's like, no, come back. And we see a ship flying away. Maybe that's her family who supposedly sold her to, the junkyard dude played by Simon Pegg. Maybe not. But at the end of that moment, we hear old Ben Kenobi's voice saying, Rey? And I remember hearing about how they actually took like a word that Alec Guinness says in episode 4, and they just, what was?
It was the word afraid.
Yep, there it is.
And they just cut the Rey out.
Yeah. So anyway, one fan theory I heard a while ago, and also I don't really keep up with fan theories that much at all for Star Wars, but one I've heard a while ago and that I've wondered about is she somehow related to Obi-Wan?
That was a theory that was floating around. I remember that.
But I don't know, that might be a bit far-fetched, because to suddenly say, oh yeah, Obi-Wan had a kid and here's her kid, like that would be so out of left field.
There would need to be so much explaining to do.
Like there was zero romantic interest for Obi-Wan in the movie.
It's like, what?
So that, yeah.
I mean, unless they follow it up with a standalone movie for him, but I don't think.
I would
go
love
that route.
to see an Obi-Wan movie, by the way.
Oh, I think it's supposedly happening.
Sweet.
Or at least it would be for Disney Plus, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe
this
not a movie.
podcast brought to you by Disney Plus.
Right.
No,
we're not sponsored by Disney Plus.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by anything. This is very DIY. Yeah, a million things to talk about. But so that happens, and then in that vision, she has a future premonition of fighting Kylo on Starkiller Base in that Arctic sort of forest, which is also interesting because it seems like she can occasionally have visions of the future, which is pretty significant. And the interesting thing when discussing Star Wars, of course, is there is no talking about magic systems and fantasy. There is almost no consistency to the Star Wars magic system. There are certain things that are consistent, like the Force push, Jedi mind trick, all that. Jedis can magically slice lasers shooting at them super fast.
Yeah.
But all of the movies, and especially The Last Jedi, have just pulled magic out of nowhere. Oh snap, Luke was astral projecting himself onto a different planet.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to predict the magic, of course, and the visions, but it's still interesting to think about.
Well, and that's actually something that I wanted to kind of touch on, is that I think that's one of the things that I did enjoy about The Last Jedi was, the Force it's so vague and ambiguous as to what can be done with the Force, and we have your standard Force push, Force pull, Force lift, we've seen all that done. But as a writer, as a viewer, I would kind of want to see what are some other things we haven't seen done before with the Force. I think the fact that it is, there aren't really any rules written anywhere about it, I think that's an asset as a writer, and I'd love to see some creativity. So I did, while I did not enjoy how the Force projection was used and the fact that Luke wasn't actually really there fighting, I thought that was pretty lame.
Yeah.
Which we can come back to.
Yeah.
But I did love the fact that they introduced kind of a new aspect of the Force, which is the Force projection. I thought that was creative, and also the Force kind of connection between Rey and Kylo. I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah.
The way in just simple editing.
Yeah. For sure.
It just wow, something we never thought could happen is just this Force connection across huge distances. I thought so. I would love to see the Force being taken into new areas. Let's see some new ways the Force hasn't been used.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
there still needs to be rules, some sort of rules. And I think like that's the one thing that we do see is like Force users, it somehow takes a physical exertion, you know, like you see them straining, you see them focusing, you see their hands trembling. I mean, when you rewatch, you know, Empire Strikes Back and we see Yoda lift up the X-Wing fighter, you know, you actually kind of see, you know, it doesn't look that easy for him, which I love. Like, I love that it actually looks like the Force takes a little bit of effort and focus.
It makes it more believable.
It makes it so much more believable.
Yeah.
I mean, I, as a kid, you know, used to think that if I only focused enough, like I could grab that lightsaber right there. And I used to sit.
Oh, yeah,
sit
me
there
too.
Thinking, you know, I mean,
I'm sure we
who
all
hasn't done that? But
Right.
but it's because it was made to look so believable. And I think, you know, with the new movies, and it's like everything's just CGI. Like, there's no more physical rigging involved and whatnot. It's like, I feel like the Force tricks look too easy, almost. But that's just another topic.
So one thing the last thing I want to mention about Rey's Vision episode 7 before we dive into 8 is and this goes back into what you were saying earlier about her being some sort of Palpatine clone test subject thing. The thing about that very end of Rey's Vision is at the very end of it, she hears this whisper that says, "These are your first steps." And so that could be Palpatine, you know? Because again, one interesting thing is...
Wasn't that Obi-Wan Kenobi, though?
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's very ambiguous. Like, who whispered that? We definitely hear Old Ben's voice saying Rey. But...
So that was actually young Ben Kenobi. They actually brought in Ewan McGregor to record those lines.
To record that line. Is that confirmed?
That is confirmed. So I do know that these are your first steps as Ben Kenobi.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there you go.
Does that shoot down your theory?
No, it's okay. I think in that case, that would seem to suggest that it could just be Obi-Wan's spirit in the Force ether that is guiding Rey, or that could maybe suggest a familial connection. But again, I feel like if they were to go in that direction,
hope it's not the familial connection.
See, that's one complaint I would have for Star Wars as a whole. Naturally, you can't have a galaxy fully represented in terms of characters, in terms of importance. Like, that's even a country is too big in scope for 50 movies, right? Let alone a planet, let alone a galaxy. So of course, when you're writing an interplanetary space epic, you've got to really focus on like 20 or less characters, right? That makes sense.
Right.
That said, so much of Star Wars is very, very dynastic. It's like, it's all about the Skywalker family. It's like so centered on them, right? And it is the Skywalker saga, sure, that's the name of it, I guess. But, you know, like, so much of the plot of this new trilogy is from the fact that, oh yeah, Leia is suddenly like a Super Saiyan with the Force, and that's why her son is so powerful, and that's why he's basically the new Darth Vader. So it's kind of like, in that sense, if Rey were a Skywalker or a Kenobi, it would be too familial. Like I like, because there's an entire galaxy out there, and there are characters all over that galaxy. So I think it makes perfect sense for her to not be familially related to any of them.
Right.
But anyway, I think that leads us into episode 8. So we can briefly go over that. We could talk for 1,000 years about all the issues we had with it. But I think we should, I guess, I feel like we should mainly discuss how it affects how we would write 9. Right. So with the context, as you mentioned, of Kylo and Rey talking to each other, you know, I think one of the common criticisms of episode 8 is that it has too many gotcha moments, right? Like just for the sake of being subversive, just for the sake of being different,
just to pull the rug out from
under you all the time, right? Like, what's her name, Rose, preventing Finn from dramatically sacrificing himself, and of course,
let him sacrifice himself.
And my favorite thing is Leia Mary Poppinsing back into the ship from like outer space, absolutely out of nowhere,
ridiculous.
Anyway, so it seems like one of those gotcha moments might be Snoke revealing that he's the one behind Kylo and Rey Force talking to each other, right? Because he reveals that. He's like, I've been making you two talk so that I can get to Luke Skywalker.
Mm.
But maybe he's the one who sort of put their Skype lines in connection with each other. But that doesn't necessarily, I mean, I think when people first view that movie, they're like, oh, wait, are they brother and sister? You know, it's like, oh, wow, is there a relation here?
Right. Because we see echoes of the Luke and Leia connection.
Right. Exactly.
In the original trilogy.
Sure. Yeah. And so I think like Snoke, it might be one of those Rian Johnson moments of, that's his name, right? Rian Johnson?
Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
Yep.
Of gotcha, they're not actually related. It was just Snoke the whole time.
Right.
But to me, that revelation doesn't necessarily rule out a connection between them.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. It's like, is that a relation?
Well,
I don't know.
and if we do go with the theory that she is, you know, she was some biohatchling taken from the cells of Luke's hand, then in some way they actually are related.
Right. Yeah. What you would,
In a weird way.
In a very scientific way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the last things to go over for episode 8 might just be Rey's vision on is it Ahch-To? That's the name of the planet?
Ahch-To.
Ahch-To,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can go over Rey's vision there. We can go over a billion things.
I mean,
honestly.
there's just so much to talk about.
But I guess one thing I would like to mention as far as it relates to episode 9 is there's the whole Snoke thing. What do you think about Rey's vision at Ahch-To?
So remind me again. This was the vision she had when she stepped into
that hole.
I
guess there are multiple visions, and I'm
Yeah.
probably blanking on
Yeah.
some of them. But yeah, like that where she's like echoing in space and time,
Right.
which I thought was dope. I thought that was awesome. Like,
So
what do you think about that?
So, I mean, it was very, again, another one of those moments where it like builds up to something and then it's entirely something else. But actually, if we go with the theory again that Rey is some sort of clone, what she is seeing, actually, it could have actually been revealing the truth, and that maybe there were like 100 other iterations of her, and she is a clone.
See, here's what I would say.
Which would be crazy. And
I think personally, that would be goofy. That would just be flat out ridiculous. Like, oh, gotcha. There are hundreds of you,
would
Rey.
be.
Like,
how sick would it be, though? I mean, I could imagine, you know, if J.J. Abrams went with this, you know, he could have a pivotal scene where Rey, you know, steps into this room and it's like she sees like hundreds of replicas of her in cryogenic stasis or something like that. Like that would be, I mean,
it'd be fascinating. It'd be a great reveal.
It would be a great reveal.
See, to me, I could get on board with Rey being a clone derived from Luke's hand. I think that's a really cool idea. But for there to just be lots of her, I just think like that's where I would draw the line. Like she should be the only one to me if you're going to go in that direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it would still be quite a powerful scene for her to see lots of her in like tubes and all that kind of stuff. And that's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah.
So I think going into episode 9, you know, again, one of the main problems that I have with the whole new trilogy is the fact that, you know, why did we need this at all? Right? Did we really need to come back to the Star Wars universe, you know, 30, 40 years after Return of the Jedi, after that saga has been, you know, nicely wrapped up and concluded? If we're going to call for a reunion of the old cast and bring the whole band back together, let's do it right. You know, and I think that's what was like hyped when we first found out, which I was super stoked when they first announced, you know, that they were going to make a new trilogy of Star Wars. I was like, yes, let's bring back the whole band together again, you know?
Yeah.
But then what has disappointed me most is that we never get that satisfying moment of seeing the band back together. Han dies in the first movie. You know, now, you know, Carrie Fisher is physically dead, so they you know, whatever they shot, they don't have a second chance anymore. But Luke and Leia don't meet until the second movie, but then even then, Luke is not actually physically there. It's just his projection. But never do we have a moment where it's like Han, Leia, Luke, Chewie, R2-D2, and C-3PO back together again in the Millennium Falcon, flying off on a mission and needing to go save someone or something. Like, even if you maybe wait until the very end to have that scene, or maybe it's just one scene and they've still gone all their separate ways, and then they come back together again. Like, I just wanted that one scene, man. I just wanted that one scene.
I totally understand feeling that way, but I actually feel the opposite way. Like, I think it would have been too much of a nostalgia grab to have the three of them in the Falcon, saying, Chewie's messing around with Han. They're shooting TIE fighters. Like, I'm glad, because episode 7, I think we could all agree, was way too similar to episode 4.
Right.
I thought episode 7 was great, but structurally, it's just 4 again.
It's
right?
just the same thing.
So it's like, I'm not necessarily saying they should never have been in the same room together, but I don't think they should have been like the gang's back together doing more action adventure space stuff. Like, I think it's good that they're pretty separated, because 30 years have distanced them, and the justification for their separation, whether that's good enough or not, it's like, I think it makes sense that they wouldn't have this like nostalgia reunion thing.
Well, all I'm saying is, like, I would have personally loved to have seen at least one scene where they got back together like that. That's fine. Keep the storylines where they've all gone their separate paths, and they haven't seen each other for 30, 40 years, and they've all gone their separate ways and whatever. Like, that's fine. But, like, have something like bring them together. And, if you're going to hype this up that way, I think the fans deserve at least one scene like that. And then they can go back on their separate ways and something happens. But that's just me personally.
Yeah, no, so. I totally get that. I mean, yeah, there are, again, a million ways to write any story, and that's why storytelling is so fascinating. Yeah. But so going into episode 9, for me personally, I'm not 100% on this, and I do like that Luke's hand clone theory. But I think Rey should either be that, or one thing. So in that one cave vision she has on Octu, she's like echoing through space and time. I loved that sequence. So she like almost like a voiceover narration says, like, I knew it didn't go on forever. I knew it was all leading to something. And I guess like there are all these rays in a line, and the front one is like approaching what looks like a sort of glass, like ice wall. Right. And she touches it and she says, please let me see my parents. Let me see them. And as she's touching it, we see like these two figures, sort of blurred figures, who sort of merge into one. And then the face is revealed. It's Rey's face. So this, just let me know what you think of this. What if Rey is somehow like an almost Jesus Christ like character, to where she is like the Force turned into a human, like the Force, like an immaculate conception kind of thing, like the Force just turned into a human.
She's like a physical incarnation of the Force.
Yeah, that would be interesting, I think. And she could still have flashbacks to being abandoned on whatever desert planet, because maybe she was adopted by someone and maybe they sold her to a junkyard. But either way, I think as I would write episode 9 of one of those two things. Like, Rey is like very independent from all the other characters in her origin. And I guess with the Luke hand thing, she's not that independent, but like, I just don't think she should be familially related to any of them. That's how I would write episode 9.
I like that idea. The only issue I could see with that is that technically you could say Anakin Skywalker was kind of the physical incarnation.
That's a good point.
Of the Force, because remember, he didn't have a father.
Right.
His mother just kind of spontaneously conceived.
Right.
And he was the one prophesied to bring balance to the Force. So it was almost like he was birthed from the Force to restore balance and order to the Force.
Yeah.
But I think your instinct, though, is that, okay, so we start this new trilogy, there's a new imbalance of the Force, right? Now you have the First Order, you have Sith Lords again, and so wouldn't that require another Anakin type of person that the Force would birth to restore order again? And if we're going to be rehashing the plots of the original trilogy again, then why not?
Why not have another?
Let's have another incantation. Yeah. Like, this could go on indefinitely forever, right? If the Force keeps getting out of balance. So, but I like that idea, though.
Yeah, it's just an interesting thought, if nothing else. But you're right though. I hadn't thought about the fact that Luke is also, or Anakin is also kind of like this immaculate conception character from the Force, supposedly.
But that does bring me to another point though, is that Return of the Jedi, leaves us with a very tantalizing little line that Yoda says as Luke leaves. Or I should say, The Empire Strikes Back. No, it was Return of the Jedi. Yoda hints there is another, right? And that is referring to Leia. But we've always wondered at least I've always wondered, what did he exactly mean with that? As in, if Luke failed in his mission to convert Darth Vader back to the light side, that there is another who could maybe step in and complete that job. And so it does create kind of an opportunity to explore that with General Leia as to like what was her potential that was never explored because of Luke's absence. So, I think that's maybe something I would want to explore in episode 9 is like, hey, maybe Luke did fail this time around. Okay, we want to go with that iteration. And we come back to that line that Yoda said, if there is another, maybe it's Leia this time who steps in, converts Ben Solo back to the light side, basically doing what Luke did.
Interesting.
In Return of the Jedi. And I think
that would complete the reversal, wouldn't it?
This would complete the reversal, and that might be what they originally had planned for this episode.
Before episode 8.
before Carrie Fisher untimely left us.
Well, yeah,
because they did say, I do remember reading that episode was going to be hers, this last one.
Really? Interesting.
That episode 8 was, Luke Skywalker, and episode 9, this was going to be her moment to shine, and I just wonder, did they have to rewrite that now because of her unfortunate departure?
Which is like...
But I think that would have been a very, very compelling, it's like, here we have Leia basically now. And I do think they were building it up for that. I mean,
that's really interesting.
Ben Solo's her son, and remember, we have that moment where he decides not to kill her, so he has this internal conflict.
He has the opportunity to shoot her down in episode 8, right? But he doesn't.
And so you have this same, conflict set up again as to like with Vader and his son Luke, as to like, is Vader going to kill his son Luke if he doesn't convert to the dark side? And he ends up deciding not to. Would we have that same moment?
Yeah, I like that
between Leia and Ben Solo. Ben Solo.
Yeah, that reversal. Yeah, it's like the reversal would be Anakin is the father. He goes over from the light to dark side, has a son who converts him back right at the very end and saves the day. And the reversal I can see is like Leia has a son. The son is good but turns bad, and Leia helps to convert him at the end of the day. That'd be a really interesting. Yeah, I kind of like that way of writing episode 9. That's kind of cool.
And it would match something that people have observed with the original 6 trilogy or the original 6 movies, is that they do all mirror each other as far as structure, and that way it's a beautifully written epic saga in which they all kind of mirror each other as far as plot wise, and so this new trilogy would fit right in if that's how it was written, is it would mirror the original trilogy that way.
Yeah,
I can see that they would have gone in that direction.
Yeah. So I would say we have about 15 minutes left, probably. So with that in mind, I guess we can just cut right to the chase of like, how would you write specific characters, right, in their arcs? So like, one thing I've thought of for Leia, it's like, I think it'd be interesting if she was more involved, and it'll be interesting to see if they kind of controversially animate a lot of CGI Leia in this, because I think they did mostly a very good job in Rogue One with young Leia, even though it just looked like really good video game graphics. Like, it was close. Like, it looked good.
It was very close.
It was, I thought it still looked good. But like, what I'm thinking, we've already talked about how we would write Rey and the revelation of her story, of her backstory rather. But ultimately, again, going in broad brushstrokes here, I feel like what probably happens in episode 9, and what I would probably do, working within the parameters of episode 8's already happened, is I would have Rey rally with Finn and the rest of the resistance, and ultimately probably just defeat Kylo and the First Order. Maybe certain characters you love, I think certain characters you love should die along the way. Like maybe Finn sacrifices himself or something toward the end. But I think it should definitely have a bittersweet ending, right? It shouldn't all be tied in a pretty bow. It should have some sort of a sense of loss. I also just think that like Finn is a cool character, like the defected stormtrooper, and this person who, again, it's kind of like Vader becoming good again, but not quite as dramatic. Obviously, he's just some stormtrooper. But I like how he's also independent from everyone familially, and I would like it. I think I would write Finn as having a pretty decisive and major role. Basically, I think that Finn should make decisive, big decisions, and not that everything he does should be expertly done, because he is kind of a goofy character too. He's some comedic relief, but I think that Finn should really set the stage for life after the end of episode 9. That's what I would do.
See, Finn, you can disagree with me here. Finn kind of annoyed me.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I loved him in concept of like the defected stormtrooper, but as just a character, he was just kind of a little annoying in that, I don't know, his relationship with Rey was never really well defined. And honestly, he's just always kind of in the shadow of Poe Dameron, who I thought was like came out to be a much stronger character. Now he is a flawed character, in that he's kind of, reckless and just kind of like very spontaneous. I think that little side mission going off to the casino planet was like, I mean, that was not very well thought through, and it's like, but that's kind of his character. It's just he's just kind of like, we need to do something now, let's go, and he just kind of does things and doesn't really think about them. Although Poe is that way too. But I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't think of a good character arc for him, because I just didn't know where he fit in.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's sort of this grassroots character, right? He comes from, well, he had no name until Poe Dameron was like, hey, FN2187, I think that's the number, I'm just going to call you Finn. Like, he does represent, like, again, the opposite of this dynastic character tendency where all the important ones are related to Anakin. He's an exception to that, which I do appreciate. And his insight is different, having fought for the enemy for a little while. Yeah. I don't know. That's just kind of...
But I do think you're right, though, as far as what's needed for episode 9 is that we need more character development from him.
Yeah, I agree. He needs to be important.
He needs to be presented with some choices that then define him, because he's mainly just kind of like gone along for the ride, and he's gone off and done his own thing. But as far as like, as it relates to who he is as a character, I haven't seen any character defining moments for him. I mean, he has his kind of conflict with the Chrome Trooper, who comes back from the trash.
From the action figure, basically.
Like,
that's what she is.
It's like, she just comes back to be killed off again. It's just...
She's got a cool outfit. I mean, cool
but
armor.
I feel like that was their attempt to give him a nemesis. And it's like, well, he doesn't necessarily need a nemesis. He needs a character arc. He needs a desire. He needs something he wants and needs to go after, and needs to learn, through that process. And I don't know what that is for him. I don't think he was really given. He was just given a nemesis to fight against twice. The same one,
And he
it's like-
supposedly kills her in
and
episode
supposedly
8.
kills her, but who knows? She probably comes back again.
You know how Star Wars does sometimes.
But I think you're right. Like,
Yeah.
we need to see some decisive action from him.
Yeah.
I think that moment in episode 8 where he decided to sacrifice himself, that should have been his ending. That should have been his heroic ending. Rose coming in and saving him was just kind of like, what? Like, you just doomed the whole resistance now because
Right.
you
Yeah.
just wanted to save one person. Now
and that's
you
one
know,
of the big
he
criticisms.
was going to save them all. Like,
He
what
was
the
going to
heck?
help them a lot.
It's
And
like-
so what did she say to? It was something cheesy like, never give up hope or something. Meanwhile,
You're like, great.
her
you just killed
the
all your
resistance is getting
friends.
destroyed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, but that would have been a great heroic ending for him. You know, it's like, oh, finally he made a choice that matters. Actually helping the resistance, you know, not going off and, you know, to this casino planet. I mean, it was a cool planet. It was just kind of like, in the end, it didn't help the plot along at all.
Yeah, it really
It
did.
was just kind of like circular, you know.
Yeah, so one thing I would also do in episode 9 is I think there's a bit of a theme. It's a bit loose, but there's a bit of a theme in the new trilogy of the suppression of knowledge. And so one of the reasons you see that, one of the ways in which you see that is, you know, Anakin's trying to bring back the Jedi, right? It's got his little Jedi Academy. He basically, he's trying to resurrect this order that's like mostly gone. Because like even before episode 4 begins, most of the Jedi have been wiped out, right? And so throughout the original trilogy and throughout all the time between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, there's all this suppression and destruction of records and information on the Jedi, right? And so
The Journal of the Wills, which is one thing that's talked about.
yeah, and so like another very interesting character to this trilogy, his name is, wrote it down here, Lorsan Tekka. So that's Max von Sydow plays him at the beginning of episode 7.
Yes.
He's that old man. So he knew
Whatever happened to him?
So his general backstory, there's a lot to him, and I think he's canon of novels. Maybe he was I think he was invented for the movies. Regardless, he has a lot of backstory as he doesn't really have force powers, but he's a big proponent of and supporter of the Jedi, right? And so I believe he knew Luke. At the very least, he knew where Luke was, and he knew where Octu was.
Right.
He's a person who's sort of this like rogue, like illegal scholar of the Jedi during all these years of suppression from the Empire, from the First Order. So he's this person who has like this sort of secret, forbidden knowledge. And you know, so like at the very beginning of this new trilogy, Kylo kills him, but he's already given Luke's whereabouts to BB-8, who you know BB-8 eventually meets up with R2 and they complete the map, and now we all know where Luke is. So anyway, what I would do with episode 9 as far as that goes is I would continue that suppression of knowledge kind of theme. So think of those sort of random stable hands in that casino planet who help the good guys escape, basically, right? At the very end of episode 8, it's very interesting. We see them sort of looking up at the stars, looking up at what's going on, being very inspired. And they've heard all these legends about, you know, Luke. They've met, I guess, some of the heroes of this new trilogy. And so one of them uses the Force to like on a broomstick. And and it's just like, so maybe that, so again, that's another writing prompt. It's like, how I would never have written that to begin with, right?
Sure.
But with that already existing, how would you take that and try to make it good? Maybe what that means is in the future episodes, there will be more of a common folk rise of the Force. Because think about how many people throughout the galaxy
is more prevalent than people realize.
Because I think about how many people in the past like 50 or so years, ever since the end of episode 3, right? Execute Order 66. Ever since that. Think about how many people
Execute Order 66.
Think about how many people have this natural inclination to learn and use the Force who just haven't because they don't know about it, because they're not allowed to become Jedi.
So maybe there are more latent Force users out there. They just don't know it.
And that's what I think that whole stable hand with the broom thing is alluding to. Like maybe in episode 9, they're just, because again, it's this dynastic thing. It's like only the Jedi, they can come from humble beginnings.
Maybe
but
it's not so much of an elitist thing going forward.
Exactly. And I think the Jedi are a little bit elitist in the sense that they have to go to academies and train. but the Jedi can come from anywhere. No, it's kind of very, very
Right.
this Buddhist kind of philosophy and all that.
Well, I think that is
and
that's
the Sith are
appeal of the Force.
the
yeah.
Sith are like lords in a feudal system. They're like privileged, the privileged few, you know? So I think like what I would do is I would take that little seed of this random kid just use the Force on a broom. There are lots of people out there with the Force, and that's something I think I would want to implement in episode 9.
That could actually play into a really powerful scene where, you know, you have your villain, whoever it turns out to be in episode 9, whether it's Rey or, spoiler alert, Palpatine risen from the dead.
Of course.
Somehow,
I haven't seen that in the trailer, but I'm not surprised at all. Like, okay.
You know, I mean, let's just, you know, if we're gonna have Death Star 2.0, you know, let's just bring back the old villains.
Death Star.
You know?
This would be Death Star 4.0.
4.0, yes.
We have it in episode 4. We have it in episode 6. We have
man.
it in episode 7. So please, I so strongly hope. Is there going to be another Death Star? Please no.
Well, at this point, there has to be, right?
Oh my gosh.
No, I don't believe. I haven't seen that anywhere.
Okay, I hope
trailer.
not.
I have seen other things that would imply that there are more Star Destroyers equipped with essentially a Death Star weapon. But anyways, going back to what you said, though, actually, that could be a really powerful scene where instead of having some sort of main character like Rey defeat the enemy, somehow or another, you get common folk in there.
Right.
Using the Force, who they never knew that they had before, and collectively they bring down the enemy. I think that would be a really powerful way to end it.
I think so too.
And usher in like a new trilogy or open up a new chapter of like, hey, we're going into new uncharted territory with now like so many more people.
Different playing field.
Can use the Force. And it's no longer just a select few.
Yeah.
And it's like everyday people, and it's everyday people that defeated the evil empire 2.0.
That'd be so cool.
Dude, that's epic.
I think, or at the very least, everyday people help to defeat the bad guy. Again, it might be kind of out of nowhere. It might be too abrupt if, like, one of those stable boys, like, kills Kylo Ren suddenly with a lightsaber. But again, like, they can use the Force in so many ways to help.
Well, but that's the
good
thing,
guys.
Yeah. It's like, and what would happen if they channeled their collective Force abilities or something like that?
Right. Exactly.
Like, that would be super powerful.
Wouldn't that be awesome? I think that'd be so cool.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to talk about quick was, you know, just kind of a major oversight, I think, in the new trilogies was like, okay, Return of the Jedi ends with this, you know, super positive and encouraging note of you have the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Anakin Skywalker. I think they added in Qui-Gon Jinn too, didn't they? In the remastered
I lose
versions.
track.
I think
of
they've
all
added
those,
in the Force ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn
Yeah.
now. But it's like, but it ends on this note that implies that Luke will now forever be watched over by the Force ghosts of his peers.
Yeah.
And it's like they're always going to be there to mentor and look over his shoulder and to help him. And it's just kind of like this really super encouraging, you know, feel good ending.
Where
and
is that in the new trilogy?
And I was like, what? Where are they? Are they sleeping off in Force Ghost Land? Like
they're just taking a nap.
Are they on vacation? Like, do they not care? Like, finally they brought Yoda back.
Yeah.
And he just kind of like had a little cameo and offered his one little, you know.
Well, didn't Yoda cast that lightning bolt that burns the
he
library?
He did. Yeah. You know, and then he kind of like giggled and, you know, which I did love seeing him again, but it's just kind of this major elephant in the room of like, where are they? Don't they care anymore about what's going on in the galaxy, about what's happening to people we love and care about? And it's just kind of like, okay, you know, I actually want to see Anakin again. You know, I think that's a major oversight. It's like we see his mask. We see, you know, this is his grandson now who's turned to evil and destroying the galaxy. Don't you think he would step in and say something?
Yeah.
You know, it's like
1,000%.
Like,
yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
actually, you know, I actually turned from the dark side. So your whole idolizing of me is wrong. You know, it's kind of like
absolutely, yeah.
Unless, hey, can you turn bad even in life after death? And, you know, even in their Force ghost self, can they maybe turn back to the dark side, or are there evil Force ghosts? Like, are there Sith Lord Force ghosts? Like,
Yeah, sure.
that's something we haven't thought about. And
Right.
do they fight? Like, I don't know. It's like that might be
Yeah.
a little cheesy to see that, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's unaddressed. And,
I think
and
supposedly.
it's just such a big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, I at least want them to show up. Because when you think about it, Ben Kenobi, when he died in A New Hope, he came back and he played a pretty big role, even in the following 2 movies.
Totally.
In Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Like, he was
Important
present, he was
decisions
counseling, he was
Yeah.
very much involved with Luke, and then suddenly it's like we don't have any of that anymore. It's
Yeah.
just a vacuum. So I would want to see that addressed. At least bring them in, counseling or whatever you want to do with that. But that is just kind of like a big oversight, I think.
I totally agree. I think that's a great point. Yeah, I would totally bring back that. And one last thing I will mention, I think, before we put it into our pilot episode here.
There's so much to talk about.
Oh,
we could talk for hours.
I know, so much. One thing I would also mention too is that, there's this Jedi Academy that Luke was training. Supposedly Kylo killed all of them, but it's a very simple plot device, I think,
Supposedly.
to maybe 1 or 2 of them survived, even if just one of them survived, right?
That would be interesting.
It'd be the only constraint I think you'd be working against is how to not make that feel just pulled out of nowhere, like a bit too abrupt, right? Because we're in the third
surprise.
We're in the 3rd movie
Right.
of a trilogy.
Right.
So how do you make that not just a cheap out of nowhere thing? But I think it would make a lot of sense if one of them at least survived and is a Jedi, and they're out there and they're working against the First Order. That's and so that's something I think, as a side conversation, Stranger Things should have done a lot more of. That I think Stranger Things should have used a lot more of, the other, MK Ultra test subjects, right? We get that kind of a little bit in season 2.
Yes.
But anyway, that's what I think I would do with episode 9 is I would consider writing a draft in which, like, there's another survivor of that out there who knew Luke.
And who might come back and who is raising an army on the side, again.
Yeah, maybe there is
might
an army.
be a little Deus Ex Machina,
Sure,
right.
It might
like
be a little
the god
too
dropping
much.
out of the clouds and solving all the problems magically. But
Yeah.
but it is an interesting thought, and it would
Yeah.
make sense that there's someone else out there. Again, it just comes back to this whole idea, like, Rey can't be the only one.
Yeah,
She can't be the only one who's force sensitive and who's
Right.
like,
absolutely.
there has to be more people.
Yeah,
And we don't want to see it be this elitist kind of like hierarchy.
yeah.
So,
Man, I think we have to call it there. But this has been fun.
This has
and
been awesome.
I hope any of you listening, watching, have enjoyed this, and we'll definitely be doing more of these in time. And so, yeah,
we didn't get to talk as much about what we would write for episode 9, but I do think we touched on a lot of subjects, and it will be really interesting once we see the movie
yes,
to come back and compare notes.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm going to see it because I have a baby coming, baby number 2 in 10 days, and so that means I'm going to be stuck at home for the good.
Yeah,
But eventually I will see it, and we will come back
totally,
and we will compare notes.
absolutely, yeah. Well, until then,
Until then,
this is Zach Fisk.
and this is Sam Askew,
All right.
and may the force be with you.
May the force be with you.